The first crack in the facade came during a thunderstorm. It was late, just past midnight, when the house shook with the force of the wind outside. The rain hammered against the windows like it was trying to break in. I'd been sitting in the dark living room, staring at the muted television, replaying the argument Emma and I had earlier that evening. It wasn't anything dramatic, a disagreement over who forgot to take the trash out, but it lingered in my chest longer than it should have. She'd gone to bed hours ago, or so I thought. But then I saw the faintest flicker of light down the hallway. It wasn't the bedroom, it was coming from the guest room. Curiosity pulled me up from the couch. I crept down the hall, avoiding the spots where the floorboards groaned under pressure. The guest room door was slightly ajar, and through the gap, I could see Emma sitting on the edge of the bed, fully dressed. She wasn't on her phone. She wasn't reading. She was holding a small leather-bound journal in her hands, flipping through it with an intensity one didn't recognize. A journal? She'd never mentioned keeping one. I stood there, caught between the urge to step inside and the fear of what I might hear if I did. That's when I heard her whisper. "I don't know if I can keep this up." Her voice cracked, and in the silence that followed, I realized she was crying. Emma, who was always calm and composed, who could debate politics or negotiate work contracts without missing a beat, was crumbling right in front of me. Keep what up? I thought, frozen in place. Before I could decide whether to barge in or retreat, she did something that hit me like a sucker punch. She closed the journal, pressed it to her lips, and muttered a name. Not mine. I backed away so quickly I nearly tripped over the hallway rug. My heart was hammering as I stumbled back into the living room, suddenly hyper-aware of how loud the storm had become. My mind raced to connect the dots, but I didn't have enough pieces yet. When she finally came back to bed an hour later, I pretended to be asleep. The weight of her body settling next to me felt foreign, like she was someone else entirely. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The journal. The tears. The name. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about us, suddenly felt like a lie. The next morning, I woke up early, though it wasn't because of an alarm or my usual habit of getting the kids ready. My head was pounding, my stomach churned, and I couldn't stop replaying what I'd seen the night before. Emma lay next to me, her breathing slow and even, like nothing had changed. But something had. The journal had made it real. That name, I didn't recognize it, but the way she said it felt too intimate to ignore. I knew I had to find out more, even if it meant doing things I wasn't proud of. Emma usually left for work around 8:30, which gave me just enough time to think up a plan. As she moved around the house, getting ready and sipping her morning coffee, I forced myself to act normal. I even kissed her on the cheek when she said goodbye, though the gesture made my skin crawl. As soon as her car pulled out of the driveway, I went straight to the guest room. The journal wasn't there. The sheets were smoothed over, the pillows perfectly placed. Emma was always meticulous like that, but there was no sign of the journal. I checked under the bed, inside the closet, even behind the picture frames hanging on the wall. Nothing. I felt like an idiot, tearing apart my own home for evidence of something I couldn't even articulate yet. But then I remembered Emma's closet in our bedroom. She always kept a lockbox there for important documents, or so she'd said. Sure enough, the box was still there, shoved into the back corner of the closet beneath a pile of winter sweaters. I carried it out and placed it on the bed. My hands trembled as I keyed in the combination, our anniversary date. Inside, everything looked normal at first, old bank statements, passports, even some of the kids' birth certificates. But beneath all that was the journal. I opened it slowly, unsure of what I'd find. The first few pages were harmless, filled with notes about work and reminders to call her mom. But then I saw it, a series of entries marked with the same name I'd heard her whisper. Ethan. The entries weren't long, but they were enough to make my chest tighten. July 15th. Dinner with Ethan tonight. We talked about everything, our dreams, our regrets, the things we can't say to anyone else. It feels easy with him, like we've known each other forever. August 3rd. Ethan says he understands me better than anyone ever has. He asked if I was happy in my marriage. I didn't know what to say. September 10th. I told him I couldn't see him anymore. He said he'd wait. I slammed the journal shut, my heart racing. This wasn't just some casual acquaintance. This was something deeper, something she was hiding. The worst part? I had no idea who Ethan was or how long this had been going on. I needed more information, but the journal wasn't going to give it to me. As I stood there, trying to figure out my next move, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway sent me into a panic. I quickly shoved everything back into the lockbox, locked it, and returned it to its place in the closet. By the time Emma walked through the front door, I was already sitting in the living room, pretending to scroll through my phone. She looked surprised to see me. "Forgot my laptop," she said, brushing past me on her way to the office. I nodded, keeping my face neutral, but my mind was racing. If I confronted her now, I'd have nothing to back it up except the journal. I needed proof, undeniable proof, before I made my move. For the next few days, I kept my distance, observing Emma carefully. She didn't seem different, still her usual self, laughing with the kids, chatting with neighbors, even cuddling up to me on the couch at night. But now, every word she said felt like a lie, every touch a betrayal. It wasn't until Friday that I finally caught a break. Emma had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter while making dinner. Normally, I wouldn't have touched it, her privacy was her own, but things weren't normal anymore. I glanced over my shoulder to make sure she wasn't watching, then opened her email. Most of it was work-related, but there was one message that caught my eye. Subject: "Can't wait to see you again. From, Ethan." I opened the email and read it quickly, my stomach twisting with every word. Emma. Last night was amazing. I've never felt so connected to someone before. I know this is complicated, but I'm willing to wait as long as it takes. You're worth it. E. I didn't even hear Emma coming up behind me until it was too late. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice sharp. I froze, my mind scrambling for an excuse, but there was no point. She saw the email, saw the look on my face, and knew. "Who is he?" I demanded, my voice louder than I intended. Emma's face turned pale. "It's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think," I shot back. "You've been lying to me. Sneaking around behind my back." "I haven't," she started, but I cut her off. "Don't lie to me, Emma. Not now." She opened her mouth to respond but then closed it again, her expression shifting from defensive to defeated. She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. That was all the confirmation I needed. I waited until the kids were asleep. There was no way I could let them hear what was coming. Emma spent most of the evening in silence, sitting across from me at the dining table, picking at her dinner like it was poison. I didn't bother pretending everything was fine anymore. The tension between us was thick enough to choke on. When I finally spoke, it was calm but firm. I didn't want to give her room to wriggle out of this. "We're going to talk about Ethan," I said, my voice even. Emma froze mid-reach for her glass of water. Her hand trembled slightly as she pulled it back, resting it in her lap like she'd been caught stealing. "Where do you want me to start?" she asked softly, not looking up. "How about at the beginning?" I said. "Who is he?" Her jaw clenched, and I could see her debating whether to tell me the truth or spin another lie. Finally, she sighed and leaned back in her chair. "He's someone I met through work," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "How long?" "About 6 months." I nodded slowly, letting that sink in. 6 months of lies, sneaking around, and whatever else she'd been doing behind my back. "Have you slept with him?" Her eyes widened, and for a second, I thought she might deny it. But then she looked down at her hands, her shoulders slumping. "Yes." That single word hit me like a sledgehammer, but I didn't flinch. "Not yet." There was too much I needed to know. "How many times?" "Twice," she said, her voice cracking. "Where?" "At a hotel," she admitted. I stood up, pacing the room. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe, but I forced myself to stay focused. "So, what is he to you?" I asked, spinning around to face her. "Some fling?" A midlife crisis? What? Emma's head shot up, her eyes flashing with anger. It's not like that, she snapped. Then what is it? He listens to me, she said, her voice breaking. He makes me feel seen, like I matter. I couldn't help but laugh, but there was no humor in it. Seen? Like you don't matter to me? Like I haven't spent the last 10 years building a life with you, raising our kids, supporting your career? Emma flinched at my words but didn't respond. Was I not enough for you? I pressed, my voice rising. Was our life together so meaningless that you had to go find someone else to make you feel seen? She shook her head violently. It's not that simple. Then explain it to me, I demanded. Emma stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I don't know how to explain it, she said, her voice desperate. I didn't plan for this to happen. I didn't want it to happen. But it did, I said coldly. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I made a mistake, she said, her voice trembling. I know I hurt you, and I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I felt so lost, and Ethan, he was there. He made me feel alive again. Her words only fueled my anger. And what about me? What about the kids? Did you think about us at all when you were off feeling alive with him? Emma broke down then, sinking to the floor and sobbing into her hands. I wanted to feel pity for her, but all I felt was rage. I don't know how we come back from this, I said, my voice hard. You didn't just betray me, Emma. You betrayed our family. She looked up at me, her face red and swollen. I'll do anything, she pleaded. Counseling, therapy, whatever it takes. Just please, don't give up on us. Her words hung in the air between us, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. I turned and left the room, leaving her sobbing on the floor. In the silence of our bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. My mind was racing, trying to process everything she'd said. She wanted to fix things, but how could I ever trust her again? How could I look at her and not see the lies, the betrayal? I heard her footsteps in the hallway, slow and hesitant. She appeared in the doorway, her face pale and tear-streaked. Can we talk? She asked quietly. I didn't look at her. What else is there to say? She stepped inside, wrapping her arms around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. I love you, she said, her voice barely audible. I finally turned to look at her. Do you? Because you sure as hell didn't act like it. Emma flinched but didn't argue. She just stood there, staring at me with those tear-filled eyes, waiting for me to say something, anything. But I couldn't. I didn't have the words to express what I was feeling, and even if I did, I wasn't sure she deserved to hear them. Finally, I stood and walked past her without a word. I needed space, time to think. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, I realized this was just the beginning. Whatever came next would define the rest of our lives, but for now, I just needed to breathe. I couldn't sleep that night, not with Emma's confession echoing in my mind. My thoughts were chaotic, flipping between rage and disbelief. Every corner of the house felt tainted, as though her betrayal had seeped into the walls. I couldn't escape it. Around 3 a.m., I found myself in the living room, sitting in the dark. I stared at the framed photos on the mantelpiece, our wedding picture, the kids' school portraits, a family photo from last summer at the beach. All of it felt like a lie. My life, the one I'd built with her, wasn't what I thought it was. I knew I couldn't let this go. If Emma thought she could destroy everything we had and come crawling back with apologies, she was wrong. She needed to understand the gravity of what she'd done. I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. By dawn, I had a plan. The first thing I did was call my lawyer. Richard and I had been friends since college, and I knew he'd have my back. I didn't tell him everything, just enough to get the ball rolling. I want to protect myself, I said. And the kids. Richard didn't ask many questions. He just told me to come to his office that afternoon and bring any documentation I had, bank statements, property deeds, anything that could establish a clear picture of our finances. After the call, I started gathering what I needed. I knew where Emma kept all her important papers, so it didn't take long to find everything. As I worked, I stumbled across something unexpected: a separate bank account in her name. The account wasn't joint, and I'd never seen it before. Curious, I logged into our online banking system and pulled up the statements. It didn't take long to confirm my suspicions. Emma had been funneling money into this account for months, maybe longer. There were transfers labeled as savings, but they didn't make sense. We had joint savings. This was something else entirely. My gut twisted when I saw the withdrawals, large sums taken out in cash on the same days as her so-called work events. The betrayal ran deeper than I thought. When I arrived at Richard's office, I handed over the statements and explained what I'd found. "She's been planning something," I said. Richard examined the documents, his brow furrowed. "It looks that way. We'll subpoena more records if it comes to that. For now, let's focus on securing your position." He outlined my options, most of which centered on protecting my share of the assets and ensuring custody of the kids. By the time I left his office, I felt more in control, but my anger hadn't subsided. That evening, I began the next phase of my plan. Emma had left for a yoga class, a new habit she'd picked up in recent months, so I had the house to myself. I went through her laptop again, this time combing through her files and messages with a fine-tooth comb. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Emails. Dozens of them. Some were innocuous, but others were explicit, leaving no doubt about the nature of her relationship with Ethan. They detailed plans to meet, shared intimate thoughts, and even included photos I wish I could erase from my memory. I copied everything onto a flash drive, my hands shaking with a mixture of fury and satisfaction. Emma returned home a couple of hours later, completely unaware of what I'd uncovered. She greeted me cautiously, as though she wasn't sure how to approach me after our confrontation. "I was thinking," she began hesitantly, "maybe we could go to counseling." I didn't respond immediately, letting her squirm under the weight of my silence. Finally, I looked up and said, "I'll think about it." The truth was, I wasn't thinking about counseling at all. I was thinking about how to make her regret every single choice she'd made over the past 6 months. The next few days were a blur of calculated moves. I shared the flash drive with Richard, who confirmed it would strengthen my position in the divorce proceedings. I also began documenting everything: her absences, her behavior, even the way she interacted with the kids. Then came the piece de resistance. I scheduled a meeting with Ethan. It wasn't hard to find him. Emma's emails provided all the information I needed. He worked at a small marketing firm downtown, and I knew his schedule from their exchanges. I waited outside his office one afternoon, leaning against my car as he came out for lunch. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with a cocky demeanor that made my blood boil. "Ethan," I called out as he walked by. He turned, surprised. "Yeah?" I stepped closer, keeping my tone calm. "We need to talk." "Do I know you?" "No, but you know my wife. Emma." His face went pale, and he took a step back. I don't know what you're talking about." "Cut the crap," I said, my voice low but firm. "I know everything. The emails, the hotel meetings, all of it." Ethan swallowed hard, his bravado crumbling. "Look, man, I didn't mean for." "I don't care what you meant," I interrupted. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to end whatever this is. You're going to stay away from her, and you're going to keep your mouth shut. If you don't, I'll make sure everyone you work with knows exactly what kind of man you are." He nodded quickly, his eyes darting around like he was searching for an escape route. "Do we understand each other?" I asked. "Yeah," he mumbled. "Good." I turned and walked away, satisfied that I'd made my point. Back at home, Emma was waiting for me. She looked nervous, as though she sensed something was coming. "Where were you?" she asked. "Out," I said simply. She didn't press further, and I didn't offer any more details. Let her wonder. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a strange sense of relief. The battle wasn't over, but I'd taken the first steps toward reclaiming control of my life. Emma thought she could break me, but she was wrong. This was just the beginning. The house was silent, except for the occasional creak of the floorboards as Emma paced in the kitchen. I sat in the living room, sipping coffee that had long gone cold, waiting for her to work up the courage to face me. I'd given her no reason to relax these past few days, and it was starting to show. Her attempts to maintain a facade of normalcy, smiling at the kids, asking me about my day, were getting sloppier. She knew something was coming, and tonight, she'd find out exactly what. When she finally entered the room, her steps were hesitant, her face pale. "Can we talk?" she asked, standing near the doorway like she might bolt at any moment. "Sit," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. Emma obeyed, folding her hands in her lap. She looked more like a nervous child than the confident woman I'd married. I took a deep breath, not because I needed it, but because I wanted her to see that I was calm and in control. "We're done," I said, my tone steady. Her eyes widened, but she didn't speak. "I've thought about this long and hard," I continued. "I've tried to understand how we got here, what went wrong. But at the end of the day, you made a choice, Emma. You chose to betray me, our marriage, and our family." She opened her mouth, but I held up a hand to stop her. "I'm not interested in your excuses," I said. "I'm not interested in hearing how lonely you were or how Ethan made you feel alive. You had every opportunity to come to me, to tell me how you were feeling, to try to fix things. But instead, you lied. You cheated. And now, we're here." Emma's face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But she didn't. She just stared at me, her hands trembling. "What are you saying?" she whispered. "I'm saying I want a divorce." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Emma's head snapped up, and for the first time, I saw something other than guilt in her eyes. It was fear. "Please, don't do this," she said, her voice breaking. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but we can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can." "No, we can't," I interrupted. "You broke something that can't be fixed. I don't trust you anymore, and without trust, there's no relationship." She shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face. "We have a family, Steve. We have kids. Are you really going to throw all of that away because of one mistake? Don't you dare try to turn this on me," I said, my voice rising. "I'm not the one who threw it all away. That was you, Emma. You're the one who decided our marriage wasn't worth protecting." Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't let up. "You've been funneling money into a secret account," I said. "You've been lying to me for months. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Did you think I'd just forgive and forget once you got caught?" She froze, her eyes wide. "How did you?" "It doesn't matter how," I said. "What matters is that I know. And now, I'm done." Emma buried her face in her hands, her body shaking with sobs. I waited, letting her cry, but I felt no pity. Not anymore. When she finally looked up, her face was red and blotchy. "What about the kids?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," I said. "We'll figure out custody. I'm not going to keep them from you, but I'm not going to let you drag them through this mess, either." She nodded slowly, her eyes hollow. "And what about us?" "There is no us," I said. "Not anymore." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall. Finally, Emma stood, wiping her face with trembling hands. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," she said. "But for what it's worth, I am sorry." I didn't respond. I didn't trust myself to. She turned and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The next morning, I woke up early and started packing. I decided to stay with my brother until the divorce was finalized. The kids were still asleep, and I wanted to be gone before they woke up. Emma was in the kitchen when I came downstairs, sipping a cup of coffee. She looked up as I entered, her eyes swollen from crying. "You're leaving," she said. "Yes," I said simply. She nodded, setting her mug down. What do I tell the kids? The truth, I said. That we're separating, and that it's not their fault. Emma bit her lip, her eyes filling with tears. I really am sorry, she said. I didn't respond. Instead, I picked up my bags and walked out the door without looking back. As I drove away, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was sadness, of course, sadness for what we'd lost, for the family we'd built that was now falling apart. But there was also relief. Relief that I was taking control of my life, that I wasn't letting Emma's betrayal define me. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure: I was done living in the past. Moving out was easier than I expected. I thought leaving behind the house, the memories, and the daily routine would be unbearable. But as I sat in my brother's guest room, staring at the packed bags I'd brought with me, I felt an odd sense of clarity. The weight of Emma's betrayal was still there, but it no longer felt like it was crushing me. For the first few days, I avoided talking to her unless it was necessary. Our communication revolved around logistics, how we'd handle the kids, the house, and the divorce. I let Richard take the lead on the legal side of things, ensuring my financial interests and custodial rights were protected. Every time I saw Emma's name pop up on my phone, I felt a flash of anger, but it was manageable now, controlled. Emma called one evening, her voice hesitant. The kids want to know when they'll see you next. I had already planned to pick them up for the weekend. I told her so, keeping my tone flat. They miss you, she said after a pause. I miss them too, I replied. There was silence on her end, and I knew she was hoping I'd say more. But I didn't. The first weekend with the kids was bittersweet. They were happy to see me, full of questions about why I wasn't at the house anymore. I gave them the standard explanation: Mom and Dad needed some time apart, but we both loved them very much. They accepted it, but I could see the confusion and worry in their eyes. We spent the weekend playing board games, going to the park, and eating pizza in front of the TV. For a while, it almost felt normal. But every time I caught them looking at me with that unspoken question, will things ever go back to how they were? I had to remind myself that normal didn't exist anymore. On Sunday evening, when I dropped them back at the house, Emma came out to meet me. She looked tired, her face drawn and pale. Can we talk? She asked. I hesitated but nodded. The kids ran inside, leaving us alone on the porch. I'm trying, she said softly. I've been seeing a therapist. I'm trying to understand why I did what I did. I crossed my arms, leaning against the car. And what have you figured out? Emma hesitated, her eyes filling with tears. That I was selfish. That I let my insecurities and my need for validation ruin everything. I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to tell her it was too late, that her self-reflection didn't matter anymore. But another part of me, the part that had spent 10 years building a life with her, wanted to hear her out. I know I can't undo what I've done, she continued. But I need you to know that I regret it. Every day. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Regret doesn't fix anything, Emma. It doesn't erase the pain or rebuild the trust. I know, she said. But I need you to know that I'm not giving up. I'm going to keep trying, even if you've already made up your mind. I looked at her, the woman I had once loved more than anything. She was still Emma, but she wasn't the same. And maybe I wasn't the same either. I appreciate that you're trying, I said finally. But I can't promise anything. Right now, I'm focused on the kids and figuring out how to move forward. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I understand. In the weeks that followed, I began to rebuild my life piece by piece. I threw myself into work, taking on more projects than I normally would. It helped to have something to focus on, something that didn't remind me of Emma or what had happened. I also started going to therapy, something I never thought I'd do. Talking to someone who wasn't emotionally invested in the situation helped me process everything in a way I couldn't on my own. My therapist, a no-nonsense woman named Karen, didn't let me wallow in self-pity. You're allowed to grieve, she told me. But don't let it define you. You're more than what happened to you. Slowly, I began to believe her. The kids adjusted surprisingly well to the new arrangement. They spent weekdays with Emma and weekends with me, and though I knew they wished things were different, they seemed to adapt. I made sure our time together was focused on them, creating new memories that weren't tied to the life we'd left behind. Emma continued to reach out, asking if I'd reconsider counseling, if there was any chance for us to salvage what we had. I always gave her the same answer: not now. I wasn't ready to forgive her, and I wasn't sure if I ever would be. But I wasn't ready to hate her forever either. One evening, a few months later, I sat down with the kids for dinner at my place. They were chattering about school, telling me about a science project they were working on together. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a sense of peace. After they went to bed, I sat on the couch, scrolling through my phone. I came across a photo of Emma and me from our anniversary last year. We were smiling, her arm around my shoulders, a candlelit dinner in the background. I stared at the photo for a long time before deleting it. That was then, I thought. This is now. And now, I was learning to be okay. The divorce was finalized a few months later. It was amicable, as far as divorces go. We split custody evenly, divided the assets without too much drama. By the time it was over, I felt more relief than sadness. Emma and I remained civil for the sake of the kids. We attended school events together, coordinated holidays, and made an effort to keep things as normal as possible for them. But beyond that, we were just two people navigating the wreckage of what once was. As I signed the final papers, I realized something important: Emma's betrayal had broken me, but it hadn't destroyed me. I was still standing, still moving forward, still capable of building a life for myself and my kids. In the end, that was what mattered. What do you think about this story? Can betrayal be forgiven, or is it always the end of a relationship? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your opinion matters and might support someone else. And don't forget to like the video if you like this story.